Assalamu alaikum fam, hope you're doing well. We're continuing Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan. It's very great, very thought-provoking, excellent book to read for intellectuals and people who enjoy testing and growing their mind. Okay, let's begin. We're still talking about power and its dynamics. Eloquence is power because it seeming prudence. Form is power, because being a promise of good, it recommendeth men to the favor of women and strangers. So, your form is power, and it shows the promise of good. So, your health, your really bodily language does have a point. Just like kind of like how Biden is very sickly and frail. He doesn't own the room when he walks in. That definitely makes people be like, oh, this guy's a pushover, he's brittle, he's frail, he's sickly, he has dementia, he's bizarre old grandpa, he fell up Air Force One steps 3 times, he hurt his ankle, whereas someone like Putin is, riding a horse with no shirt on, is moderately more healthy looking. Yes, so form is definitely a attribute of power, right? The sciences are small power because not immanent, and therefore not acknowledged in any man, nor are at all, but in a few, and in them but of a few things. For science is of that nature, as none can understand it to be, but such as in a good measure have attained it. And the way he spelled attained is not A-T-T-A-I-N-E-D, but A-T-T-A-Y-N-E-D. It's pretty cool, the different types of English wordings he puts on here for us. Arts of public use, as fortification, making engines, and other instruments of war, because they confer to defense, and victory are power. So, look at that. Your fortifications, basically he's making it sound like your facilities and factories that you use to fund your war machine, both for offense and defensive measures, are a form of power, which, yes, it is a sort of art that you use as a public demonstration. That's why you see many countries parade their vehicles through the streets and kind of put the people in awe, while also sending a message to other nations that, hey, we're developing, so watch out. You see what I'm saying? And though the true mother of them be science, namely the mathematics, yet because they are brought into the light by the hand of the artificer, they be esteemed the midwife passing with vulgar for the mother as his issue. So that's interesting. So science is what's helping to make these instruments of war, and mathematics is the parent, he argues, right? But also the artificer, the person who's made it, is the midwife. So they're giving birth to these machines of death by using math and science. And the science is embedded within it, but the people don't necessarily put credit to the mathematics and science when they see the instruments of war, rather the one who designed it and, engineered it. Very, very, very right. I mean, good point. The value or worth of a man is, as of all other things, his price. That is to say, so much as would be given for the use of his power. Now that's interesting. Value or worth of a man is his price. Very, very telling. And therefore is not absolute, but a thing dependent on the need and judgment of another. Wow. Your worth depending on the need and judgment of another. Look at that. An able conductor of soldiers is of a great price in time of war present, or imminent. That's, yeah, very good point. But in peace not so. Whoa, he has a point. So your value, your worth, is like, depending upon the context is how he's wording it. You're in time of war, you don't need the hippy-dippy pacifist. You need somebody who can get this job done, who has the military mind, we gotta get it done, right? Wow. and learned and uncorrupt judge is much worth in time of peace, but not so much in war. Ooh, that's a spicy statement. So, a very wise, uncorrupted judge is more valuable during a time of peace than in war. Maybe because the ethics of times of war and peace, maybe he's arguing, are different here. The necessities of the context dictate, sounds like he says, the ethics, right? And as in other things, so in men, not the seller. In men, not the seller. But the buyer determines the price. For let a man, as most men do, rate themselves at the highest value they can. Yet their true value is no more than it is esteemed by others. Whoa, that is interesting. So, your value is no more than what is esteemed by others, not what you think of yourself. So basically, if you set this price, the price is really what people are willing to pay for it. Sounds a lot like capitalism. That's interesting. Dang. The manifestations of the value we set on one another is that which is commonly called honoring and dishonoring. Oh, very good point. So, honoring and dishonoring are the manifestations of value, price tags we put on one another. Because remember, previously he said that reputation of prudence, and your nobility is power, your eloquence is power, your form is power. So he's reiterating it here that the manifestation of your value in terms of honor and dishonoring is going to be related to power. You follow? To value a man at a high rate is to honor him. At a low rate is to dishonor him. But high and low, in this case, is to be understood by comparison to the rate that each man setteth on himself. Very interesting. The public worth of a man, which is the value set on him by the commonwealth. So look at that. The public worth of a human, the value that's placed upon you, stems from the commonwealth. Is that which men commonly call dignity. Okay, very interesting. So dignity is what the public commonwealth places upon you in terms of value. And this value of him by the commonwealth is understood by offices of command, judicature, public employment, or by names and titles introduced for distinction of such value. Okay, look at that. So the dignity is placed upon you by the commonwealth, either in terms of names and titles, and as a judiciary position, or a public employment, or a position in the office of command. So that is how you know where your dignity lies, your value lies in the public commonwealth consciousness, is by those attributes and positions of authority that are granted to you. Very interesting. Wow. To pray to another for aid of any kind is to honor, because a sign we have an opinion he has power to help. And the more difficult the aid is, the more is the honor. Wow, look at that. That's a good point. The more difficult the aid, the more is the honor. To obey is to honor, because no man obeys them whom they think have no power to help or hurt them. And consequently, to disobey is dishonor. This is interesting because this is getting me to think about Islam. To fully submit to Allah is to honor Allah and to heed His commandments. Here it's very interesting how he's using a different context, obviously. But if you don't think someone has the power to help you, like with a job or something, and they can't hurt you, you're most likely to have inclinations to dishonor them in that way, because there's no utility there in the immediate. To give great gifts to a man is to honor him, because 'tis buying of protection. Dang, like you just said the quiet part out loud, right? And acknowledging of power. So, if you give gifts to someone, you're honoring them, and you're also demonstrating your power, and they are acknowledging your power. So, like, I forget which country it was, but they gave a dog to Vladimir Putin. And that's a pretty cool gift, right? Because you're like showing like, hey, here's this gift. It was like some very beautiful dog, right? And him receiving it, like there's this exchange and realization and acceptance of the power dynamics of the situation. A lot of military leaders do this to each other, diplomats, even in offices. There's a lot of situations we can think about where this type of statement is actually applied that we can observe. To give little gifts is to dishonor, because it is but alms, and signifies an opinion of the need of small helps. That's interesting. Very interesting. So, for me, I would think it more in the Islamic way, where even if you can give just a smile, kind word, or half of a date, that's a form of charity. And if you are in a position of need, you should be grateful for what you get. Beggars can't be choosers. But when he's talking about sovereigns here, people who are more in positions of power, if the gift is sort of disrespectful and not fitting of the honor of the person, then you could definitely look at it as a sort of alms, a sort of jab, right? If somebody, they give you a car, just let's take an extreme example, and then you give them like a $20 gift card to like Applebee's or something, right? You're like, I give you a car and you give, and then they say that person's rich, you know? To be sedulous in promoting another's good, also to flatter, is to honor. Flattery, I don't think flattery is a sort of honor. But let's see his point here. As a sign, we seek his protection or aid. So that's interesting. If someone's on their throne, the seat of authority, they're being flattered, they are seeing that person is seeking their protection and aid. I think in ancient Rome, in some of the houses, when Pompey and Caesar were at war, when the power dynamics were bouncing back and forth, they would go to like those who were on the side of Caesar and then like kind of give them gifts and then like, oh, give them something, flatter them, so that they could protect their homes from the Roman mob. So that's an interesting aspect, because whom they flatter, if it's in time of danger, can get a sort of protection placed upon their home. This is something that I've noticed throughout history, so he's not wrong, but at the same time, I don't think you should flatter. Sort of like the brown nosers at work, right? They're always flattering the boss, hoping they'll never get reprimanded or fired, and that if they make a mistake, they'll have enough compliments in the compliment bank with their employer to not get fired, versus someone who just talks to the boss normally, right? There are some social dynamics that you can look at through various angles and perspectives to kind of pick apart his statement here. To neglect is to dishonor. To neglect is to dishonor is a good point. Like if somebody gives you a horse as a gift and then you don't take care of it, and then that person sees that you've starved this horse, you haven't brushed it, it's covered in all these parasites, it's not, the horseshoes aren't fresh. They're like, I gave you this like prime horse here. You have the ability to take care of it and you didn't. You starving it and hurting it is like a sign that you don't respect the gift, right? You didn't maintain it, right? You didn't value it. Very interesting. Oh, man, that's cool. Very cool. What do you think, man?